Today I'm going to talk about this. There are so many talented people in the vintage Mac community. There are so many talented people in the vintage Mac community. One individual in particular, known as Tashtari, has made a bunch of projects relevant to the old class of Macintosh that I'm fond of. Tashtari teamed up with Demic. This one is a MacRecorder clone called the Tash Recorder. It's a small box that connects to a serial port, modem, or printer as it goes for these beige Macs. And it simply allows recording. Now, I know that sound recording is absolutely taken for granted today, and no one bats an eye when a computer can do it. But picture yourself in 1986 with your brand new Mac Plus. All you have for sound is a mono speaker inside the case and a mini jack port for speakers or headphones. There's no default way to get sound into this. Apple would later rectify this by providing a very cheap but serviceable microphone that would plug in a mic-in port in the early 90s, such as this one that my dad used to own with his PowerBook 170 all the way from 1991. It came standard with LC class Macs, so the ecosystem was swamped with them. But there's a special time frame when the MacRecorder came onto the scene from its launch year of 1988 up to about 1990, when it was highly desirable to own one for many applications. I'll try to cover some of them in this video. So there's two topics I want to get to. One, how do you make yourself a clone like this today? And two, how do you use it on its period-correct intended machine, which will be the venerable Mac Plus? I'll kind of retrace what you could do back in the day with the original MacRecorder, but since those are hard to find and fetch a ridiculous price on eBay, the clone allows to relive this slice of history. Just a warning before we get too far into this is not a commercial product you can just submit an order and get it in the mail. It's a DIY project that you have to order the PCB from your favorite PCB manufacturer and then order the components and solder it yourself. And there's an extra painful step that doesn't make sense when you do it at small scales. Here's what I started with. The main board is a 4-layer PCB, which I ordered in green to be as cheap as possible. The blue plastic case hides it pretty well in the end anyway. Following instructions in the PCB page of the GitHub website, I soldered the general purpose switching diodes. There are 6 of them. Since I got a badly marked batch from AliExpress a few years ago, I always make a point of double checking the proper orientation with this little tester gizmo. This is all good. Next up, a trio of 2.4 kilo ohm resistors, and you can see the Japanese style space saving strategy of putting one of them vertically. That's the thing about Tashtari's projects. A standard plastic case is used and can be purchased from the electronics supplier Mouser. When you want to force your project to be that size and only use through-hole components, you gotta get creative to fit it all in. I wouldn't have minded surface mount components, but not everyone is comfortable with those, so I get it. And then I got to the main LED, which came with these legs of the same lengths. Usually the shorter leg indicates the minus side, while the longer one is the plus side. They were the same in my kit. I had to quadruple check with the tester to avoid making a mistake before soldering it in. Once installed, it had to be slightly bent towards the edge of the PCB. Then a bunch of ceramic capacitors where only 7 are used, so you end up with a few extras, always nice. Next, the sockets needed for the 2 dip chips with 8 pins. One of them is a CMOS op amp, and the other is a PIC12 microcontroller, which you must program beforehand. More on this later. The sockets are important for the latter one. Should the firmware ever change in the future, it would require a reprogramming. After that, we have 2 unequal film capacitors, a pair of voltage regulators, and 4 electrolytic capacitors. Last but not least, we have the connectors, which account for the bulk of the price for this build of material list. That includes a potential meter for the gain knob. There's a switch to toggle the mode for the audio input level between mic and line. There's a microphone jack, which is entirely optional when you use the device. That's because there's a built-in electronic microphone right here that works really well on its own. And then there's the serial socket for the cable that links to your Mac. Here's the final shot with everything inside the case, and here are some exterior shots once everything is complete. I wouldn't call it someone's first soldering project. You should practice on junk boards first if you're totally new. It's important to practice fundamentals with flux first and foremost, but this is a pretty easy project considering it's only using through-hole components. Before you screw the case in and button things up, you gotta program the PIC12 chip with the firmware present on the GitHub page, which is compiled as an X file. That's definitely a step that can chill some of you out there, and I totally get it. I do have a multi-purpose chip programmer that I got a few years ago, the TL866 Plus, but I guess I'd need a new pricier revision of this to program the chip for this project. The cheapest option would be to get a PIC Kit 2, 3.5 or 4 out there on AliExpress, which is what I did. I'm not a fan of getting that one usage gizmo for projects such as these, which is why it was important to get in as a group of people to mitigate these costs together. The very same Tashtari who co-created this whole project graciously offered to send me a program chip at cost, which is like $1 plus shipping, but I declined as I was already a step ahead. Now, don't be like me. When you order the programmer, make sure you click on the variant that comes with an adapter board with a ZIF socket, or you'll be forced, like me, to reproduce the same wiring on a breadboard. It's not complicated by any means, but that's one more friction point that could discourage some who are only lightly versed in electronics. The AliExpress website confused me because the picture shows that the adapter is there, but it's actually not included when you order it. You have to go out of your way a bit to click on the variant that has it included and adds a few extra dollars. It's not complicated to power through without the adapter. Also probably necessary, whether you have the adapter or not, is a strong source of 5V, because depending on a computer USB port, might have just not enough power to get into the required chip writing voltage. I'll be using my bench power supply, and yet again, that's not something everyone has and creates yet another friction point. Let's actually use the breadboard now. So Tashtari kindly provided me this sheet and saving me some time reading the data sheets for the PIC12 chip that we'll be using now. So let's respect the first pin here. Let's pick any place on the breadboard. Right there is fine. Alright, so it's in. The first pin of the PIC kit, line number 1, is going to be connected to pin 4 of the chip right there on the bottom left. So it's marked with an arrow here. Let's pick red color. Only 5 cables out of the 6 are used, so plug it right there and give it some space. There we go. So let's deal with the rest of them in order. The second pin, which is down there right beside the red, is gonna be connected to the first pin of the chip. Let's go there. And then pin 3, which goes to VSS, is gonna go from here to here. Pin 4. Next one in line is gonna go here. It's for the data. And then pin 5, the last one we have to deal with is the clock, goes to pin 6 of the PIC12 chip. Just have to find a spot that connects well. So I'm gonna double check this, and last but not least, we have to beef up the voltage. So whatever pin is used as VDD here is gonna have to be connected directly to my bench power supply, as well as, I guess, through the PIC kit, which goes to the modern computer in order to program it. But I'm gonna like ramp up or stabilize the 5 volt by bringing another line here to this 5 volt positive rail, and we could also maybe match the VSS, which is the ground, to the negative rail, just to make sure. All right, so all that's left to do is to bring in the power supply down somewhere here, and then connect the PIC kit with this USB cable from my bench power supply. I've got these banana connectors going to DuPont style wires, which I can use as female connectors or male. So really convenient for electronics, for TTL signals. I wouldn't trust like something that needs power with these cables, but for this purpose it's fine. So I just plug it there, and when I'm gonna be ready with everything plugged in the modern computer for programming, I'm gonna push this button to activate 5 volts. The GitHub mentions the MPLAB suite of programs to deal with the chip's firmware, but keep in mind they have to maintain the code on this GitHub. The MPLAB IDE is used to compile the firmware into an X file, but as end users, we don't need to mess with this, so we don't want to develop code for it. We just need to burn the end result into the PIC12 chip. So only get this program called MPLAB IPE and get version 5.35. It has to be an old enough version in order to work with our chip. Support has been dropped with more recent versions. Let's note that it's unfortunately a bit of a pickle for future proofing unless this program version is kept somewhere. Thankfully, the IPE is fairly easy to use. So select PIC kit 3, I guess. It's the one that's being detected, despite the fact that I have a 3.5, but it's a clone unit, so whatever. And just select PIC 12F1501. And when you attempt to connect, it's going to complain about not having enough voltage, actually. So it needs 5.5, which is absolutely essential now to get a power supply from a control source. So let me activate this in a few seconds. So I'm not going to lie, and MPLAB IPE is pretty finicky. I've had a lot of connection issues. I've had to make sure that the power supply 5.5 volt is applied to pin 1 of the chip. And even then, it complained. So here it seems to work. Here it seems to be able to connect without complaining. So let's go ahead and take the X file. And let's program it. Pretty quick, and let's verify. Seems to be good, so that's done. It's pretty annoying, a lot of steps, and you have to make sure that everything is in order. So it will chill out a lot of people from attempting this project, unfortunately. Plug this into your Mac is super easy. I'm using a Mac Plus here, and you're free to use the serial port of your choosing, either modem or printer. This unit powers itself through that port, so there's no need for external power at all, and this is always nice when this happens. You're good to go, and now let's move on to the software side. Today I'll be using Sound Edit 2.0.5 since it plays nice with System 608. That Sound Edit 1.0 is meant to be used with a bootable disk. The disk image is provided with a System 4.2 Finder 6.0, which is older than what most people are familiar with. The main disadvantage of this is that this old OS can't understand SCSI hard disk very well, and it won't boot when you try to bring in a blue SCSI or similar SCSI replacements that want to act as hard disks. Studio Session is an all-time favorite piece of software of mine. It's a musical notation software and featured the excellent, really memorable music compositions of Ed Bogus. It used trickery to go beyond the normal 4 simultaneous sounds that the Macintosh sound driver would allow. Normally, these would be very simple waveforms like square, sawtooth, sine, but the polyphony would be the saving feature and still make it sound okay. This was the strategy of Concertware, an also excellent program. Studio Session went past all that by doing some wizardry in code and mix complex sound waves and get up to a whopping 6 at the same time, allowing some kind of really neat precursor to tracker music technology, which relied on samples. Studio Session came bundled with dozens and dozens of instrument samples, and it was always so frustrating to be limited with the stock ones. When you stumbled upon Sound Edit back in the day, there actually is an option to save your sound sampled directly into a Studio Session compatible instrument. I saw that back in the late 80s and I couldn't make my own sounds since I didn't have the hardware. But now I can. So give me a minute and I'll fetch my main instrument, which is in fact not represented in Studio Session, but I'll have to rectify this. It's been a while since I played the violin on the regular, so bear with me as I try to make simple notes, no vibrato, on open strings. It's not necessary to record each of the 4 strings, but they do each have their own timbre in real life, so I went ahead and did it. One thing you have to remember is to set the musical note you actually want to model in Sound Edit, so that Studio Session knows at what frequency you're recording and can then open up all of the other notes from that one single sample. So I ended up inserting notes in Studio Session from a piece I found in my stack of sheet music. Ended up using the best of the 4-string, lowered it an octave. I'm not super sure of how long the sound clip must be made for this program. This is Bach's Concerto for 2 violins in D minor, using my violin's recorded sound. A goofy thing we can start doing now that we have this technology at our fingertips is start replacing sound samples with wrong ones inside pre-made tunes. Let's compare one tune called 1002 and give that a listen. Alright, that rooster sound is hilarious. I'll then record an automaton, the toy instrument from Japan. I recorded this sound. And as you can hear, I added some reverb, which is called space, and smoothed out the sound wave and cut it to shape and amplified it. In studio session, replacing instruments is a breeze with this menu item. Here, I just have to make sure I'm reusing the same note I was recording with, middle C in this case. So what else can you do with sounds that's fun? Well, there's always the obvious, which is add new custom beep sounds for the Mac OS that would replace your quack or standard beep. It's really easy to save a new sound clip directly into a system file from Sound Edit itself. Another cool thing that I really want to do in 1989 was to add my own custom sound effects in World Builder. This is a game making engine for adventure games that would let you add graphics, character stats, items. You could add conditions with some light programming scripts. You could also add sound, and this manual here tells you about another program, SoundCap, with the MacNifty suite. I'll have to explore all this a bit later because I really was into making my own world builder games, and so was my brother. So that's it for today. Do I think it's worth it for most people to get one of these? Well, only if you're a hardcore collector. If you want to play with sounds on old Macs, there's always the free route of crafting them on modern computers and converting them down to your old Macs. Doing that takes more steps, but it's definitely way cheaper than this. However, I made this video so I could help you live out this use case vicariously. As always, thanks for your time if you made it this far. This channel is not yet monetized, so it would mean the world if you found it within your heart to perform the free actions of liking and subscribing. Later!